Many of you will have recently gone through the process of choosing a high school, or perhaps deciding between homeschooling and public schooling or learning at a tutor center. What was the process like? I wonder, did you go to open days or school interviews? Were there forms that you had to fill in, tests that you had to write? Applying for and choosing a high school was a pretty big deal. You know that you're going to spend 5 years there, and those teachers will be the ones that help you prepare for your matric exams. Those coaches will be the ones that train you in your favorite sport or cultural activity. And it's going to be where many of the people you spend the most time with will be, and hopefully where you'll make many important friends. And so because of all this, I'm imagining you took some time to make sure that the school that you're going to now was a good one. But I wonder, have you given as much thought to choosing a church? Now that might seem like a bit of a silly question, because you're probably at the church that you're at now because of your family. But that won't always be the case, will it? One day you won't live with your parents, and you'll need to decide A, whether you will go to church, and B, which church you'll go to. Now I hope that you're already convinced about the importance of church if you've chosen to follow Jesus, because today I'm going to be focusing on helping us think about how we should decide which church to go to. So, how do you choose a good church? Well, our Bible passage today comes from the book of Hebrews, and it gives us 3 broad themes that run throughout the whole New Testament actually, and links them to what a good church should be like. Here's what they are: faith in Jesus, hope in eternity, and love for people. Now let's look at each of those in turn and some of the ways that we can tell if a church has these things. So, first, a good church will have and teach faith in Jesus. Can you think of a time that you used a map or maybe an app like Google Maps or Waze to find a new place? Did you get there? I hope so. If you did, you demonstrated that you had some faith in that map to take you where you wanted to go. And your faith was proved right. In the sitcom series The Office, there's the scene where 2 colleagues, Dwight and Michael, have a fight about whether to have absolute faith in their GPS. Michael is convinced that the machine knows the right way, and he follows it against all reason, and he ends up driving the car off of a pier into a lake. What you put your faith in to take you where you want to go is important. And so it is with churches. Listen to what the writer of Hebrews says in verse 19. He says, "Therefore, brothers and sisters, since we have confidence to enter the most holy place by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way open for us through the curtain that is his body, and since we have a great high priest over the house of God, let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and with the full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience, and having our bodies washed with pure water." The writer of Hebrews writes to Christians to remind them that if they want to draw near to God, if they want an open way to God, if they want to enter the holy place where God is, then they can do so confidently if their faith is in Jesus. Because Jesus is the only one who is able to bring us near to God. See, the problem with approaching God is that he's insanely perfect, and we're not. And so unless we can have our sin, our imperfection, our guilt washed away, we can't approach God. And only Jesus can do that for us. Because when he died on the cross, he offered his death and his blood as a payment for our sins so that the way between us and God could be opened up. And this is what faith in Jesus can do for you. And so if you want to go to a good church, you need to go to a church that believes and teaches faith in Jesus. Many so-called churches and other religious-y places will teach you 1,001 ways to get closer to God. A meditation, praying, giving, good deeds, on and on and on and on. But if this is the faith they have, then they're like Michael from The Office, driving the car towards the lake. And if you join them, you'll be like Dwight, getting carried in with them. So when you're looking for a church, look for faith in Jesus. Practically, how do you do this? Well, look to see if they take the Bible seriously. Jesus says in John 5 that the Bible teaches about him. And so if a church really wants to go Jesus' way, then they're going to spend lots of time in the Bible. Some churches barely touch the Bible. Others might use it only for the cool quotes. But if a church really trusts Jesus and wants to go his way, they will read whole books of the Bible, doing their best to listen to both the easy stuff and the hard stuff. Look out also to see if the church talks about sin, because Jesus does. But many churches never mention anything to do with sin. They'll say fluffy, inspiring stuff about how you can do it, and you're so wonderful, and you can do whatever you dream. But Jesus says you're a sinner that needs someone to die for you and to change you. And so if the church never mentions sin, they probably don't really teach faith in Jesus. And if they don't teach Jesus, then they can't lead you to God. So don't go there. All right, let's consider another marker of a good church, and this is it, that their hope is in eternity. In the Hebrews passage that we just read, the writer says that not only should Christians have faith in Jesus, they should hold unswervingly to the hope they profess. Now you might ask, what is that hope? And the clue, I think, is in verse 25. It says this, "Let us not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." What is this day? It's the moment when Jesus returns, as he's promised to judge and destroy evil and recreate this world from top to bottom. Revelation 21, verse 3 to 4, give us a beautiful picture of what this day will look like. It says, "And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and he will be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.'" What an awesome promise. What a wonderful thing to look towards. In fact, looking towards this day is what helps us keep going as Christians. It reminds us that we never suffer pointlessly. It reminds us that God will one day make everything right. And so what you want in a church is a family that keeps reminding you of this, because sometimes we can lose our focus. In Cape Town, there's this race every Easter weekend called the Two Oceans Marathon. It's a long race, and so throughout the course, people volunteer as pointers. And the runners travel along the course, and the pointers show them the right way to go to the finish line. Similarly, lots of people line up along the course to cheer the runners on. They encourage them to keep going, and remember that if they cross the finish line, they will get a special Two Oceans medal. Your church should be a bit like those pointers and crowds. They should be the ones cheering you, telling you to keep going when it feels tough. When you miss church for a few weeks, they're the ones who will send you a message to check everything's okay. And when you find yourself struggling with doubts or sadness, they'll be the ones to remind you about Jesus and how God is going to make everything new. So, what's something that you can look out for to see if a church has hope in eternity? Well, here's one thing you could do. Look for how they talk about their giving. Jesus taught that money is like a hack for determining what it is a person puts their hope in. Some churches will tell you to give so that you will be blessed with lots of things in this world. These churches might promise that if you give to them, then God will give to you so that you can be richer and more prosperous in this life. And often you'll see this church spend its money on stuff like nice things for the church, nice things for the pastors. The focus of this church is on this life. But a good church will tell you to give because your hope is not in treasure on earth, but treasure in eternity. And that church will use that money not for making that church or pastors the flashiest or the coolest in town, but for ministries that share the hope of eternity with others, like missionaries and kids clubs. And so life hack, if you want to find a good church, look at whether their hope is in eternity. And if you want to do that, look at what they say about giving and how they use their money. Okay, here is the third aspect to consider when looking for a good church. Is there love for people? For the writer of Hebrews, the church is where Christians spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Now, in our world, we love love, but we're not so good at knowing what love is. Every Valentine's Day, we celebrate love, which apparently is chocolates, red pillows, teddy bears, roses, romantic gestures, balloons, and at best, some sweet words on a card. But that's not the kind of church you should be looking for. In fact, if you come across a church like that, you should probably stay far, far away. No, in the Bible, love is demonstrated by deeds. Deeds that seek what's best for others. Love is like the opposite of selfishness. And the reason why Christians are supposed to love is because Jesus loved us first, giving his life up for us. And so if you're looking for a church that loves people, what would it look like? Well, what about this? I think the people in that church would serve one another. Ask yourself, does this church look more like going out for supper at a restaurant or having supper as a family at home? Think about it. At a restaurant, people serve you. There are waiters and managers and chefs and security people and cleaners. And you go over and you hang out with your crew, and everyone else has supper at their tables, and then you go home. It's cool, but you wouldn't say that people love each other. That's how some places seem to think church works. You rock up on a Sunday, the lights dim, the music rocks, the teacher does what he's paid to, the last song is played, and then it's time to go home. But that's not a church where people love each other. How different is a family supper? You ask each other about your day because you care about each other. You might ask your family about something specific because you know what's going on in their lives. And when the meal's done, you don't just call the waiter in, you chip in. Everyone lends a hand in clearing the table, and maybe you take turns in washing the dishes and drying them up afterwards. A church where people love each other looks like that. People talk to one another, they chip in, they make tea and coffee and move chairs. They look after people in hospital, they make meals for new parents, they visit people that are lonely, they welcome teenagers. If you want to look for a church that loves people, then that's what you should be looking for. Here's another way. The church cares about evangelism. Evangelism is a word that we use to talk about people telling others about Jesus. And telling others about Jesus is a sign that you love them. I've been told that some years ago, one of the students at our local high school was killed by a train because they were walking on the train tracks with headphones on and they didn't hear it coming. Which gave me a bit of a shock because only a few days earlier, I had been walking on the train tracks for a bit while listening to a podcast. Now, I really hope that if someone saw a train coming, that they would have stopped me and told me to watch out and go somewhere safe. That would have been the loving thing to do. As Christians, we know that people are in danger because of their sin and that God is coming to judge. And so we tell others about it because we love them and because we want them to go to Jesus where they can be safe. If your church talks about telling others about Jesus and they have plans and strategies to do this, then that's a pretty good sign that they love people. Let me close by reminding you that there is no such thing as a perfect church. And so don't go looking for one or be surprised when you don't find one. But also remember that choosing a good church is super important. Much more important than which high school you go to. And so remember to ask yourself these 3 questions when you're looking, whenever that is. Does this church have faith in Jesus? Does this church have hope in eternity? And does this church love people?